Hello again. We are continuing our readings from the book What is Man? Adam, Alien, or Ape? And we have come to the end part of chapter 10, entitled Worldviews at War. And we have been discussing the various worldviews that people possess, various ways they have of looking at and understanding and interpreting the world around them. And we have begun to consider the biblical worldview. You've looked at other possible worldviews and have decided that there is a biblical worldview in which there is a united single message. Although the Bible consists of 66 books written by many different authors over a long period of time, there is a consistent and harmonious worldview that emerges from the pages of the Bible. And now, in this episode, we're going to consider exactly what that biblical worldview consists of. We begin with a subheading entitled The Biblical Worldview. By defining reality as that which exists in the mind of God, George Berkeley has already brought us to the heart of the biblical worldview. That is, of course, a reference to the previous podcast, which you need to read if you haven't done so. George Berkeley, the philosopher, has already brought us to the heart of the biblical worldview, which, in the words of the Apostle Paul, tells us that in him, that is, in God, we live and move and have our being. The quotation from Acts chapter 17 and from Paul's address to the philosophers of Athens. But to break this worldview down into its component presuppositions, I'm going to use that address, which he preached or spoke or lectured to the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers at Athens, as a kind of template. This passage is especially helpful because although the apostle is talking to highly intelligent people, they were nevertheless polytheists and idol worshippers, having no knowledge of the Jewish faith or scriptures. So he could take nothing of his own viewpoint for granted and had to cover the most basic ideas about God, the God to whom he sought to introduce the Athenians. Here is what he said in Acts chapter 17 and verses 22 to 31. Quote, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one who you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one man every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and have determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord, in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being." As also some of your own poets have said, quoting the poets, "For we are also his offspring," close quote. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. and has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. That's the end of the quotation of Paul's address to the Athenians. No doubt this is a synopsis of a longer speech, but that may actually help bring out the central ideas more clearly. What then, according to Paul, are the basic building blocks of the biblical worldview? Subheading: God the Creator. Firstly, there is a Creator whom Paul calls God, and who is responsible for the existence of the world and everything in it. This was not universally accepted in Paul's day any more than it is in ours. The idea that the physical universe is itself eternal, and therefore had no need of a creator, goes back a long way. Aristotle argued for it, though certain Neoplatonists rejected the idea. Medieval philosophers also debated the matter, and modern theories of an eternal cosmos was discussed briefly in Chapter 2, and these theories are still current. It is only in the last 50 years or so that most cosmologists, through the weight of evidence, have adopted a standard model of the universe which recognizes that it did have a beginning, just as the Bible has always said. Quoting from Genesis chapter 1, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Aristotle reasoned that the physical cosmos could not have had a physical cause, since, being physical, any such cause would be part of the cosmos, and thus incapable of creating it. That's fair enough so far, but then he drew the wrong conclusion, namely that the physical world had no cause at all, and thus had no beginning. But Paul, following biblical teaching generally, solves Aristotle's dilemma at a stroke by attributing creation to a spiritual being who is independent of the physical world. Interestingly, this attribution has a necessary implication. If all physical or material entities are excluded as causes, it also means that the cosmos was created ex nihilo, that is, out of nothing, and not from some precursor substances. In this respect, the biblical view is arguably unique among the multitude of mankind's creation stories. Creation myths abound, and almost every culture, tribe, and religion has its own story of how the world came to exist. In our modern scientific age, most of these myths are recognized as primitive, amusing, and often bizarre. They are futile attempts to explain mysteries, some of which remain unsolved today. But we need to remember that communities in various parts of the world still cling tenaciously to their creation myths, either as genuine history or as the embodiment of lasting wisdom. I quote below just 3 of many examples. First example: a cosmic ocean is a motif found in the creation myths of many cultures and civilizations. The cosmic ocean is often seen as the entire universe in a dim and non-specific past, and the first source of gods or the world. Often the cosmic ocean is still considered to surround the present world. Second example: Egyptian creation stories variously feature a cosmic egg, primeval waters, or a primeval mound. One version relates how the sun god emerged from the primeval mound, which itself stood in the chaos of a primeval sea. Third example: according to one Chinese creation myth, The universe began as an amorphous chaos. This collapsed to form a cosmic egg, which remained for thousands of years, while the opposing principles of yin and yang were balanced within it. Eventually, a horned giant called Pangu emerged from the egg and began to create the world by dividing the murky yin of earth from the clear yang of sky with a swing of his axe. These and many other creation myths exhibit some interesting features. Firstly, common themes occur repeatedly, even in widely separated parts of the world. One almost universal idea is that the Earth's surface was initially covered entirely by an ocean, out of which emerged not only geographical and biological features, but even the gods who created them. The cosmic ocean is sometimes replaced or accompanied by a cosmic egg, from which the world as we know it emerged. Implicit in these ideas is that some material stuff, whether water or egg or even chaos, was eternal, having no beginning. Only rarely is eternal existence attributed to gods or sentient creatures. Another point of interest is the way these ancient ideas live on in our scientific age. As we saw in chapters 2 to 4, the search for extraterrestrial beings is dominated by the belief that such life is most likely to be found in planets or even satellites where oceans exist or have existed in the past, while the idea of an eternal cosmic egg has been resurrected as a quantum precursor of the Big Bang. While ancient creation narratives sometimes echo the biblical account of creation, where waters also covered the Earth's surface initially, they differ in two fundamental ways. Firstly, the Bible's concept of an ex nihilo creation is not found in any of these myths. The nearest thing is when chaos is presented as the primeval condition of the universe, but chaos is not nothing. Secondly, the biblical creator is one who stands outside of time. I quote from the Apostle Peter, "With the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day." But this concept is also absent from other creation stories. It is entirely fair to say, therefore, that the Bible's creation account is unique by virtue of these two sophisticated ideas, ex nihilo creation and the timelessness of God, the spiritual creator. Skeptics may point to resemblances between the biblical account and the creation myths of other cultures and claim that the biblical narrative is just another of the same kind. But similarities such as these could have entirely different explanations. A creation myth might reflect certain basic creation facts that have been passed on from the dawn of human history by cultural transmission, even though they have been corrupted beyond recognition in other ways. The Bible's view of God as creator, on the other hand, has survived the test of time to a degree that made it possible for me, as a scientist in the 21st century, to write chapter 2 of this book. Chapter 2 relates to man's relationship to the cosmos. Subheading: Lord of Heaven and Earth, 1. Providence. The next foundational element of Paul's worldview is that God not only made the world and everything in it, past tense, but is Lord or ruler of heaven and earth, present tense. There are three issues here, providing us with the second, third, and fourth element of the biblical worldview, and we shall look at them in turn. So they are the activity of God, the sovereignty of God, and the immanence of God. Immanence means that God is present everywhere, that his presence permeates the material creation, while at the same time being wholly distinct from it. Let's start with activity. That's God's providence. Many worldviews that acknowledge the existence of God nonetheless see him as uninvolved, being remote, unconcerned, inactive in the world of human experience. Deists, for example, believe that God created all things, but subsequently left his creation to its own devices, becoming the ultimate absent landlord. Many animists' worldviews also admit the existence of a supreme being, but consider that humans need only concern themselves with the active spirits that inhabit rivers, forests, mountains, rocks, and so on, since only these spirits have any direct impact on people's daily lives. In Greek mythology, the gods were generally too busy fighting and scheming against one another to take much notice of lowly mankind. And so we could continue. By contrast, the God of the Bible is profoundly active in the world. Quotes, address of Paul to the Athenians, he gives to all life and breath and all things, close quotes. This activity can be called the providence of God and is referred to in innumerable Bible texts, such as Moses' assurance that, quotes, the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. The claim that God is the ultimate provider of our food, quote, you visit the earth and water it, you provide their grain, you make it soft with showers, you bless its growth, quotation from the Psalms, and Paul's confidence that, quotes, all things work together for good to those who love God. New subheading, Lord of heaven and earth, 2, sovereignty. The third element of the biblical worldview is that in spite of appearances, God is in control. Paul here indicates that human political history is ordained by God, who has, quotes, made from one man every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their habitations. More generally, he tells us elsewhere that God works all things according to the counsel of his will. While even Nebuchadnezzar, a heathen Old Testament king, felt compelled to testify that God, quotes, does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, what have you done? Close quotes. So this teaching, of course, when we call God Almighty. Admittedly, this creates a problem. If God is both good and almighty, why does he not prevent all evil, whether arising from natural disasters, human wickedness, or any other cause? The second concern is that the teaching could encourage fatalism, which is found in some religions, but is decidedly non-biblical. I'm going to offer answers to these questions in chapter 11. My purpose here is simply to assert that the sovereignty of God is a key element in the biblical worldview, though not always in other theistic worldviews. Subheading, Lord of heaven and earth, 3, immanence. Fourthly, the Bible worldview includes the immanence of God in the material creation. This idea is contained in Paul's statement, God is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. While God is transcendent, that is not contained within the material creation, his spirit nevertheless pervades the cosmos. Psalm 139 declares, quotes, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Close quote. Immanence is important because it means that God's activity outlined above does not involve any kind of intervention on his part. He does not observe the world from afar and then intervene as necessary or in an arbitrary way. His immanence means that he is ever present in the created order and does not need to be called in as a divine firefighter or emergency service. This, of course, fits well with the Berkeleyan concept of an ever-present God whose mind maintains all things in existence, and with the biblical teaching that Christ upholds all things by the word of his power. Subheading: Human sin, accountability, and Christ. There remain three more foundational elements that emerge from Paul's address. The human race derived from an historical Adam made in the image of God. Secondly, that human sin and accountability ensure the certainty of judgment. And thirdly, that Jesus Christ is central to the entire scheme of things. These issues are so important to the biblical worldview that we shall devote the final chapter of this book to them. And that is where we complete chapter 10, and we move on in the next podcast to the amplification of my last point. Chapter 11 is entitled Adam and the Apple.